Welcome to this panel discussion. We're glad you're joining us today to hear about cross-sector partnerships through the lens of improving access to medicines. We're going to discuss examples of the work of the Medicines for All Institute and its partners in industry, philanthropy, and in academia. We have representatives today with us from each of those sectors. And our focus is going to be on what we've done together for HIV/AIDS treatments and for COVID-19 drugs in recent years. The Medicines for All Institute was developed about 7 years ago to improve access to critical medicines by optimizing the production of active pharmaceutical ingredients, or APIs. Medicines for All does this by finding less costly and less wasteful means to manufacture these APIs. We're based at Virginia Commonwealth University in the United States. But we cannot do this work alone. It requires the involvement of many collaborators, and our panel today represents a cross-section of those we collaborate with in our work. On the panel are Dr. Frank Gupton, the CEO of the Medicines for All Institute, based here in Virginia in the United States. Silpa Sundaram, the Senior Program Officer at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Dr. Till Opatz, a Professor of Organic Chemistry at the University of Mainz in Germany. And Dr. Chris Senanayake, the CEO of TCG Green Camp, a contract research organization with operations in India and in the United States. My name is Mary Ann Vermeer. I'm also affiliated with the Medicines for All Institute, and I'll serve as the moderator for our discussion. So the first question we think may be helpful is to consider what are the key considerations when developing cross-sector partnerships? And we thought we'd start with a perspective from a major donor, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And Silpa is going to give us a walkthrough of some of the things that they have seen as they've done this. Silpa?
Hi, everybody. From the donor perspective, we want to ensure that any investments we make as donors ultimately make an impact. For example, when we make grants or investments with academic labs or small biotechs for innovative technologies designed to reduce costs for small molecule drugs that are critical for the treatment of malaria, HIV, TB, and neglected tropical diseases. Many of these labs come up with compelling results at a small scale, but for these innovations to be adopted more widely by the manufacturing community, we create partnerships with industry and make additional investments to ensure these technologies can be utilized to reduce costs for these key global health treatments. Medicines for All is an example of an investment that we made to create an institute that specializes in reducing the costs of active pharmaceutical ingredients for key global health drugs. Recently, they developed a novel process to create the oxethylene core for 3-TC that is predicted to reduce raw material costs by 10%. To supplement M4All's work, though, we made an investment with a contract research organization to reproduce and scale up the process to create confidence in the manufacturing community that M4All's work could be replicated at these lower cost targets. M4All as an academic organization doesn't have the resources to develop large processes at scale like CROs have the ability to do. We developed this partnership with academia and industry to enable uptake of this new low-cost process and ultimately increase access of this drug to patients with HIV. Another example of a cross-sectoral partnership that we invest in are product development partnerships, or PDPs. PDPs are nonprofit organizations that bring together stakeholders from the private and public sectors to research, develop, and support access to new health technologies that target diseases that affect low and middle income countries. PDPs typically partner with the private sector to commercialize products. We've been actively working with PDPs in TB and malaria to utilize M4All strategies for lowering costs earlier in the development cycle for pharmaceuticals. M4All seeks to give these partners the best possible process from the outset. These types of partnerships will hopefully allow for drugs to be introduced in the market at lower cost, rather than making changes in the manufacturing process after it has been fully developed. A key part of our investment with M4All is a yearly target selection process to identify high priority APIs to fill the portfolio with candidates for manufacturing process optimizations. We solicit nominations from our PDPs and the wider global health community and recommend which targets M4All pursue in their labs. This process has proven to be successful in creating a rich portfolio that represents the priorities of several different sectors.
That's great, Silpa. Thanks. Appreciate it very much. Till also has a specific perspective on what unique contributions an academic institution can make to a collaboration like those Silpa has described and others, and also what limitations there might be. So Till, take it away. Tell us a little bit about what you've been doing at University of Mainz.
Thanks, Marianne, and hi hi to the audience. So my perspective is that of an academic researcher, and I can say that universities are a source of innovative technologies, such as NMR spectroscopy, which was first a lab curiosity, the Nobel Prize winning cross-coupling reactions, which find application in large-scale production nowadays, and also flow chemistry that has academic roots. Universities are a perfect place for curiosity-driven research, which may eventually set the benchmark for the next generation of research and production. I have several examples of that, such as mRNA technology for COVID vaccines. One of the most prominent ones and probably the most widely used in the United States has been actually developed by a spin-off from my university, BioNTech, in Mainz, which partnered up with Pfizer to achieve a really nice vaccine. Other examples may be the use of renewable starting materials for doing chemical synthesis instead of oil. That's something that would be considered typically academic research, but it can be shown that such endeavors can be as efficient as the existing petrochemical processes and offer new ways to manufacturing of pharmaceuticals as well. University labs can afford to engage in high-risk blue sky research projects without immediate perspective for generating return on investment. But there are also some shortcomings we have to be aware of. Work must be published at some point when it is of significant size. So we cannot do something hidden or just below the radar. If it's of a significant size, let's say of a PhD thesis, it has to be published. We can postpone it, but at some point it has to be disclosed. It has been mentioned already that upscaling is certainly something that is better done in industry. So we can handle, let's say, up to about 100 grams of product, but certainly not a kilo scale. That's something we can't do, and that would also be non-economical if we would try that in our place. Training is an important aspect. So we are working with graduate students, which are motivated and well trained, but they are certainly not the highest level professionals. But that gives us cost effectivity in terms of salary, unless we have, let's say, a bilateral academic industrial setting where very high overhead rates may apply. But fortunately, this is not the case in this setting with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, where the overhead rates are really moderate. We have access to cutting edge equipment at universities, including self-developed machinery, which is oftentimes not found in industry, and we can function as a multiplier. So the students in our courses get in contact with the aims of the project and the aims of the foundation, and that gives also a quite nice setting, generates motivation, and also disseminates the aims of the entire endeavor.
That's great. Lots of ways. So you mentioned a couple limitations. Are there any others you would think you'd want to highlight? One is the publication, the requirement to publish. Is there anything else that might be limiting?
Yeah, maybe I guess those would probably also apply to industry. Let's say we should have a contract at some point in place. Take some time to negotiate, but that would be the same in an industrial setting as well. So okay. I guess we have a lot of other contacts with industry. We see how they are working, and that it is really beneficial to have this contact established. And that's what made chemical industry in Germany great in the last century, I should say.
Yeah. Sure, that's great. Okay. Chris is, speaking of private industry, Chris brings a perspective as the CEO of TCG Green Camp. So perhaps you can talk a little bit about the perspective that a private sector company has on cross-sector collaborations like those you've had with Medicines for All.
Yeah, no, no, again, my name is Senanayake, CEO of the TCG Green Camp. This is an utilizing normally innovative science, frontier technology, and global talent pool. In TCG Green Camp, we have in India, the huge talent pool. We are utilizing, our two sites, one in Calcutta and the other one is in Hyderabad. So we are offering, the starting from the discovery to all the way to the commercialization. So in this case, in our collaboration with the Bill Gates Foundation, we are involved to make this unmet medical need, the HIV drugs, simply larger quantities without any problem to integrate to make the utilizing continuous flow chemistry. We have also established the many drugs the continuous fashion to make the very small footprint continuous flow chemistry and catalysis the fundamentally our forte to do this basically the medicines for all the intermediates and the basically the APIs.
Mm-hmm. Great. Do you have any examples of how you bring new technologies or new processes to this collaboration?
TCG Green Camp is the now really developing these technologies to advance these drugs to the marketplace very rapidly, utilizing a very small footprint and highly economical sense to enter the market.
Great. That's great. Thank you, Chris. So Frank, maybe you could just talk very briefly. A couple people have referred to continuous flow chemistry, and maybe you could just take a minute to make sure our audience understands what that is. And then we can talk a little bit perhaps about what that means in terms of collaboration.
Thanks, Mary Ann, and thanks for the opportunity to talk to you today about what we're doing here at Medicines for All Institute at VCU. The issue about continuous processing is it's not new. Let me start with that. It's been practiced in the chemical industry for years. It just hasn't been applied to pharmaceutical operations. And the best analogy I can make to you about continuous processing versus the alternative approach that the pharmaceutical industry uses, which is batch technology, is how you make spaghetti. A batch process is how you make spaghetti sauce. You put everything in a pot, you heat it up, you cool it down, you dump it out. A continuous process is how you make spaghetti, the pasta itself, where you're continuously feeding the starting materials in and you're continuously taking the product out. The reason why this is so widely used in the chemical industry is it's a very cost-effective way of making molecules. The capital cost is lower, and more importantly, the ability to be able to reproduce the process much more consistent. When you start thinking about the analogy that we were making with regards to the spaghetti, each batch of spaghetti sauce tastes a little bit different, but each batch of pasta tastes the same. And that's okay when you're making spaghetti, but not when you're making pharmaceutical products. So this becomes a really important element that is one of the reasons why the FDA is so interested in implementing this more broadly in the pharmaceutical industry to be able to increase the robustness of these processes. So we've been working on a platform with the idea that when we develop a process, it could be done in an agnostic manufacturing platform. And when I say that, what I mean is it can be done either batch or continuous, because as Sopa said earlier, the idea behind this is when we develop something new, we want to get it out in the marketplace as quickly as possible. So for those people who have existing batch manufacturing capabilities, it can go directly into their facilities. But for those people who don't have investments, legacy investments in batch manufacturing, who want to try an alternative approach that may be more cost effective, the option is available to them based on the way we've designed the syntheses of the molecule.
Great. So what considerations has Medicines for All had in mind when we have considered cross-sector collaboration like those we've been talking about today?
Well, I think Sopa kind of hit the nail on the head when she talked about uptake of these technologies. And I think that there's two elements to that that are really important. first of all, it has to be scalable. And so we have kind of a tiered approach when we start looking at these processes. So the first thing that we do is we develop the process with our graduate students. And one of the things I would point out, in addition to what Till said, was one of the challenges that we have with graduate students is they have very limited experience in commercial operations. So when we develop some great new chemistry that we feel like has got a real chance to be able to reduce the cost of the active ingredients, we want to make sure that that process is scalable. So we use Chris's organization, TCG, as an intermediate platform for us to be able to evaluate the scalability of the process. Chris has a group of highly talented chemists that can actually, that have that industrial experience, that can look at where the gaps might be in this process that could keep it from being scaled up. And then once we're comfortable that we've got a process that's scalable, then we transfer it over to, we make it accessible to the broader business community and chemical community to be able to give them access to it. And in the same fashion with the Medicine for All, with the Gates Foundation, we try and use maybe a contract manufacturer to be able to run it on a much larger scale. So these are some of the approaches that we take in order to ensure that these processes are scalable. But the second thing that we found that's equally important is if we can develop a process that has a very small carbon footprint, then companies will be much more interested in taking up these processes. And we've seen this routinely on the transfer of these processes out into commercial operations. So those two things, I think, in summary, are the really important elements that we kind of strive for. First of all, making it scalable, and secondly, having a reduced carbon. But the bottom line on the third point is something that's kind of unique to academia, and is that we use dollars and cents as our ultimate metric for success, so that whether we can actually get the cost of goods in the marketplace down to a point where those that are in most need of these drugs can afford them.
So can you give us an example of what this collaboration has done by being involved with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and with academia like the University of Mainz and with TCG in terms of making pharmaceuticals more available? What does that meant for making the drugs more available by having all these folks involved?
Well, I think the point is the more people you have looking at the same problem, the higher the probability you're going to have in getting into the root cause of the process and the key cost drivers in the process. So by taking a collective approach on this, I think that we have probably the best chance possible to be able to come up with a low-cost process. I'll give you a good example. The first kind of test case that the Gates Foundation gave us was a drug called nevirapine. At the time, it was one of the real high-volume HIV drugs that's currently being used to treat HIV. The process, I have to say, I was a little concerned about the selection of this target, because I led the team that developed the second generation process when I was in industry for this drug. And I thought it was actually a pretty good process. That process, for example, was generated, the overall yield was about 56% on that process, but it generated about 60 kilograms of waste per kilogram of product. When we went back and revisited the chemistry and pulled in some of our colleagues from both industry and academia, we came up with an entirely different approach to assemble the molecule. And when we did that, we were able to increase the yield in the process to 92% from very simple, cheap building blocks. And we reduced the amount of waste generated in that process from 60 kilograms of waste to 4 kilograms of waste. So and in doing all of this, we were able to not only reduce the cost of the marketplace, but also strengthen the supply chain by sharing the benefits with the manufacturers so that they would continue manufacturing and have a reasonable profit margin on the product. So there were multiple benefits from this, but I think the important thing was, at the end of the day, the consumer, the people that really needed the medication, benefited from it and got it accepted in the marketplace relatively quickly.
That's great. So we've got a few minutes. Let's see if we can maybe have the panel answer a couple of other questions real quick. And thank you to each of you for taking the time to explain a little bit about your perspective on this. I'm wondering if we might be able to talk a little bit about what we see as the biggest challenge in an effective cross-sector partnership. Is there anyone who'd like to weigh in on that one?
I'll take a shot at this.
Okay.
Because it speaks to one of the things that Till and I both hold very close to our hearts. It's the reason why we're in academia. It's about training the scientists for the 21st century and giving them the tools they need to be successful, and so that they can become change agents in the marketplace. These are individuals who have had little experience in scale up of processes, but benefit tremendously from the opportunity to work with industrial partners to understand what it takes to commercialize a product. When you think about it, that's a pretty amazing statement, that you've got students in graduate school who are commercializing processes. This is very unique to academia, in that most of the things that are done in academia really never see the light of day into the marketplace. So this is a unique training platform that we have, but it's a challenging platform because we're working with people that have a limited amount of industrial experience, but are being asked to do some really revolutionary things with regards to developing these new processes. I think the challenge with that is offset by the fact that you've got a lot of really young, creative minds that are going to look at these things differently than we've ever looked at them before. And that's one of the reasons why we've been so successful.
That's great. Wonderful. Where do we see opportunities in the future for developing more collaboration with different partners? Anybody else like to weigh in on that one?
I think I can weigh on that. Most of the time, the academia and industry, has the great potential to develop, the new technologies. I think the new technology is fundamentally, as we call catalysis area. The catalysis is fundamentally, the most important element, to catalyze the reactions, to advance, the economic manifold, right? So I think Frank and us, the TCG Green Camp has come up with many, the ways of doing this business, basically, especially I call the catalysis, including the flow chemistry. Flow catalysis, is fundamentally, I think, the revolutionize the industry, very soon. So we as a team, the TCG Green Camp and Medicines for All has looking at many aspects of this type of, the processes to advance these unmet need drugs, especially the HIV, high volume drugs you have to take to the market today. So it's not that easy, this type of technology to develop. So that has to be done by academic, industry, and together. Otherwise, it never cannot be done. So I think this is a very important fact. What we are doing actually in Medicines for All today.
Excellent, thank you. Silpa, or Till, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Silpa, you want to go first?
Sure, yeah, I think that, one thing that we also do, which, helps us to mitigate risk in some of these investments is, and I think Till talked a little bit about this as well, is global access and ensuring, all of our investments are available to anyone in the manufacturing community or any of the community at large, to ensure that, anything that we're funding is available for anyone who would like to adopt it. And so we put this into our investments as a way to mitigate risks between the pharmaceutical sector and some of the, academic institutions, and just to make sure that, everything that we do is globally available.
Great. Yeah, Till?
Yeah, I can maybe add a little bit to this. That creates an extreme motivation for the students. And I would like to contradict Frank in one point. The students do have, at the beginning, when they start their project, little experience, let's say with financial means of a process, but they learn quickly. And they love to learn. And what is really amazing is that they browse through all the prices also in India import, and they say, hey, I found a cheaper option. Yeah. And this is what we want to see. And this ensures carrying, the spirit of the entire collaboration into the next generation. And we confront them with hard to solve problems, but early stage of their career. But I think this is truly beneficial to have this happening early on, instead of doing a regular PhD thesis and then have them after a postdoc maybe get in contact with the real world. That's not what we should do. But what we are currently doing here in this collaboration is the right way to go. And I'm 100% convinced that it's going to be successful also in other settings. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you, Till. Thank you, all of you. I have one last quick question, and maybe it's not such a quick question because it is a big one, but how do we mitigate for risk in these partnerships? Someone could fail to deliver, or, what do we do to mitigate against risk?
I think prospectively looking at this, I think the biggest thing that we can do to mitigate risk and ensure success is communication. And I think that one of the things that I feel like that we've built into our system is that we have regular meetings with both the foundation and our collaborators, both in industry and in academia. And we don't have separate meetings with them. We have joint meetings, so everybody gets to hear everybody's perspective on it. And in doing that, I think everybody walks away with a higher level of comfort that we're going to achieve the objectives. And when we don't when we have a problem that we've identified, we collectively solve it and everybody's on the same page. So I think this is one of those things that is kind of, it transcends what we're doing into other sectors of our economy where we don't maybe communicate as well as we should. But I just want to add one other thing to Till's comment too, Marianne. This is really important, is what Till said is absolutely correct about our students. When they start this process, they're kind of green, but I think the use of financial metrics allows them to focus the research in areas where it's going to have the highest impact, and they pick up on it very quickly. And I think that's the great thing about this, and that we're really generating the scientists and engineers of the 21st century that are going to solve these grand challenges that are faced with us right now in ways that we haven't been able to do in the past.
Well, we'll look forward to seeing that all happen. So I think we're very near the end of our time. We appreciate everyone joining us today to hear about our work at the Medicines for All Institute. You'll see at the end of the screen a little bit of information about where to find out more. We appreciate your time today, and we're grateful for your interest in the work we're doing. Have a great day.